us off with the weather.
Well, today is going to be a high of 68 with a low of 46. You can look forward to some clouds, but mostly sun. The sun's coming back. This week you can expect a high of 86 on Sunday, and looks like the lowest day is going to be Wednesday and Friday with a low of 49. But it's just going to be straight sun with some clouds, of course, and Thursday you can expect some rain.
All right, beautiful. There's no sadly it's raining on Thursday?
Well, it's...
That was excellent. That was excellent. Well done. All right. Well, speaking of sun, we're going to bring the always sunny Jody Summers on here today to talk about quality carbs. Jody's our news contributor from Northern California and is always sharing some fantastic information about nutrition with us today. Thanks for joining us, Jody.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So let's have this conversation about carbs. It's kind of this this subject that most people have very little information about. And when there's conversation about fats, carbs, proteins, people just tend to throw them all in one category and think, well, if I'm going to limit my carbs, I should only have X number. But there's not really a lot of conversation around what those carbs probably should be. So help our viewing audience, our listening audience, understand a little bit more about what the difference is between good quality carbs and bad quality carbs that you should stay away from.
Absolutely. And I think that it's actually a misconception from all the way as far as you can go, from medical, even if you go into a hospital or a doctor's office or a registered dietitian's office, it says a percentage of carbs, proteins, and fats with no distinction whatsoever of the different types of each one. So like I said, today we're talking about carbohydrates. And there's just this, again, kind of a misconception more recently than maybe 10 years ago about that carbs are bad for you. It started with the low-fat diet, and then fat was bad, and then now we've moved to carbohydrates. And now, is there this thing that all carbs are bad? And that is absolutely not true. There are good quality carbohydrates and poor quality. And so one little interesting fact is, of the three macronutrients, which is carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, there are no essential carbohydrates. An essential means that your body cannot make them. So there's essential proteins and there's essential fats that you need to consume because your body doesn't make them. So you need to eat protein and you need to eat fat, but there is not one essential carbohydrate. So if you never ate carbs, which I am no way suggesting that you do this, but if you never put another carbohydrate in your mouth, literally your body would produce them between the fats and the protein and make enough carbohydrate for actually your body to function, which gives you the energy. So what we're seeing a lot of is that people are eating way too many low quality carbohydrates. And if you want to kind of look at them in categories, the higher quality would be anything from real food. So if it grows, if it's a vegetable, a fruit, if it grows in the ground, those are good quality carbs. If it's made in a plant, if it grows in a plant, it's a good quality carb. If it's made in some plant and it comes in a package, if it's bread or cereal or pasta or whole grain pasta or whatever it is, that are generally, and I'm making a very general statement, those are generally much lower quality. And we'll talk about why in just a second.
Well, so to go to this low quality carb situation, a lot of people are consuming low quality carbs because our lives are so busy. People are stopping to get gas. They run into the convenience store. There's very few in the way of what you just described as quality carbs inside the store. Most of them are low quality carbs. And that then is true of a really big chunk of, well, let's just pick on McDonald's and Burger King and Jack in the Box and Wendy's, and the list goes on and on, Taco Bell. So, I mean, there's such an abundance of low quality carbs that what do you recommend that people do in terms of getting these good quality carbs back into their diet? And when you mentioned about the fact that the body will produce carbohydrates from proteins and fats, that's something I'm aware of and makes complete sense. But I would offer this, that if you're eliminating that source, and that's not what you were suggesting, but
not at all, correct.
If you eliminated the source of good quality carbs, you take away all those micronutrients, the minerals and vitamins and everything else that the good quality carbs are packed with.
Correct.
So in your daily diet, give some examples of good quality carbs.
Yesterday and today, I just have it all ready to go when we're done here. I make a big salad about every 3 days, a base. And in that base, for lack of a better word, you guys are going to laugh, I call it hard lettuce and soft lettuce. So I'll take a bit, like a kale, cabbages, harder, more substantial type of a lettuce. And then I like to add in a little softer lettuce because I like the texture. So like buttered lettuce and maybe a little bit of iceberg. Start that with the base. Put 2 big handfuls of chopped mushrooms on the top of that. 1 big handful of red onion, sometimes green onion. And then I'm trying to think off the top, because you kind of caught me off guard. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what else I put on that salad. So I use a lot of mushrooms. I use a lot of onion, a lot of, broccoli rice that you can make. Maybe one time we talk about how to make broccoli rice. It's really easy and fast, and you can use it for a ton of stuff. Kind of a half of a handful, not a ton. And then I toss it with a vinaigrette, a balsamic vinaigrette, and I'll generally put in sunflower seeds and then a little bit of goat cheese at the top with some berries. Now, the goat cheese and the sunflower seeds both have protein in them, but the rest is basically just that nutrient-dense, healthy carbohydrates. There's no pasta in there. There's no rice. There's nothing that spikes the blood sugar and with the high glycemic. So all of those things in that salad was a nutrient-dense, low glycemic, high enzymatic. It has high vitamins, high minerals, nutrient dense, really top quality carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm. So Chris was wondering if in the fruit category, if blueberry Pop-Tarts count as quality carbs.
They do not. I'm so sorry to break it to you.
He's full of it. I like the strawberry ones better.
The reason why I had to set up Chris with that, because there was actually a friend of mine one time. We were having this conversation around quality carbs and fruits and vegetables, and she asked the question, well, I had blueberry Pop-Tarts for breakfast, does that count? Not even close.
Yeah, not even close. So I actually made just a list as I'm jotting down a few ideas of why they're so good. And I don't want to forget, because some of this stuff you don't hear a lot of other places. So not only are they nutrient dense, have high vitamins, high minerals, and high enzymatic properties, which is just life-giving, but they're lower glycemic, which causes less blood sugar and insulin spikes. But another thing that the high quality carbs are really good for is bulk and high fiber for good bowel movements, good gut movement. Those types of carbohydrates also provide what's called prebiotics, which is food for our good gut bacteria. So, we hear a lot about probiotics, but we don't, what do those little bacteria eat? Well, they eat the high quality carbs, the fiber part of that, which if you're eating blueberries, it's in there. If you're eating blueberry Pop-Tarts, it is not, has been, processed out. The other thing is that the higher quality, the vegetables and the more bulky thing, the more bulky carbohydrates, they actually digest more slowly. And so that helps keep you fuller longer. So those are some other things besides the fact that, they're nutrient dense that are really helpful for the body.
So really good points there. You talked about the way that good quality carbs contribute to good gut health. Mm-hmm. The inverse of that obviously would be if that you're eating poor quality carbs, you're destroying gut health, correct?
Correct. Yep.
It's
Yeah,
and I think of all these low quality carbs,
Question too.
a big chunk of these low quality carbs, and that's pretty much all of them for the most part, are chock full of preservatives and everything like that. So it's not only that they lack anything even remotely close to, you mentioned the enzymatic activity of good quality carbs would have, but they're also full of preservatives. And what you know, I was thinking about food preservatives one time on a particular broadcast and interviewing a gentleman who has a long history in nutrition, and he said, don't think the food preservative ever stops working. It worked on the shelf, it works in your stomach, it works on its way to the sewage plant. It's preserving whatever it's attached to, and that's why, he goes, that's one of the reasons why you don't really get much out of it. It's protecting the food in your gut.
And besides, not only that, but if a food goes through where there's preservatives put in general, it's been processed so much that even before the preservatives were put in, the nutrients had been removed. And again, this going back to this enzymatic properties, which happens in when your food is raw and not cooked, because once it comes to about 118 degrees, you lose a lot of those living enzymes that you get in the raw food. So when you're talking about a salad, for example, like we were using, the amount of that living enzyme is, you know, huge compared to something that's been processed, that's in a, I mean, I can't even think off the top of my head, but yeah, you lose the nutrition, and then you put in the preservative, and, you know, then you're just getting calories, which is not really nutrition. It's just energy.
What do you think it does? Because there's a lot of these chronic diseases out there in the way of diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, heart disease, cancer, all these sorts of things. What role does eating good quality carbs versus poor quality carbs, what role is it playing in what we're seeing is really epidemic growth in all of those things that I just mentioned? What role are the carbohydrates playing in it?
You know, actually, I think I sent Kyle a flyer. If we could put that up, if not, I've got it right here. And I'm gonna get to your question, but I'm gonna show you the visual of it. So okay. A good quality carb is this lower. Can you see this lower one?
Yep.
Where it doesn't spike the blood sugar and insulin so much. Better?
Yep.
Okay. So this one right here.
He's got the picture next to you as well.
The what?
He has the picture up on the screen next to you as well.
Oh, well, there you go. Then so the top one, the red one, is the higher glycemic, which spikes that insulin. So when you're talking, you know, you mentioned type 2 diabetes, anytime that you have a higher insulin in your body, which the lower quality carbs have the higher insulin response. The higher quality carbs have that bottom one. And if you'll notice, it lasts longer as well. So you get like you said, a little bit more full, and you feel more satiated rather than spiking and coming down. But there's one of these times where we should do something about cancer. There is a study I saw just last week about the relationship between insulin levels and breast cancer. And it's correlated. And so anytime that you can keep your insulin levels down by eating less things that spike that through the low quality, highly processed carbohydrates, you're going to be healthier all around, from diabetes to cancer to, those spikes cause inflammation, and autoimmune has a lot of inflammatory issues, almost everyone, arthritis, Crohn's, all of them. Multiple sclerosis, all have an inflammatory portion of autoimmunity and of the autoimmune. And so the spikes cause inflammation. So keeping those spikes down is beneficial in every single case.
It's interesting is when you mention the word inflammation, in the research that I've done, and with the medical practitioners, health practitioners, people in nutrition like yourself that I have visited with, and then all the research that I've done around a lot of the various diseases that are out there. I've always been really intrigued by the fact that, among other words, but one of the words that you can find common among all of those diseases one of the underlying problems is the word inflammation. And so then you look at, what are things that cause inflammation? And you look at this big insulin spike and you're going, okay, insulin is not only a fat storage hormone, but causes inflammation in the body. And, the whole thing, you're going, so the conversation around low quality carbs and high quality carbs isn't just about making you feel better today. It isn't just about making your gut healthier so that you have better absorption rate, enzymatic activity, all that kind of stuff going on. It isn't just that you're getting better nutrients and things like that out of it, but it's also part of a strategy of prevention of major disease.
When we can start looking at food as either, making us healthy or moving toward being unhealthy, through chronic disease, and literally every choice we make moves us one way or the other on that road, rather than just how am I going to feel in the next hour? I'm hungry. We can make better choices, and not that you're never going to have another, Christmas Danish. I mean, ever in your life. I mean, you can't. You need to leave a little bit of room, but for everyday choices, and you had mentioned earlier about stopping at some of those places on the road. One of the best things I think we can do is, just like we plan, when you go on a trip, you plan your clothes, you plan your toothpaste, enough stuff to have with you that you need while you're gone. It's exactly the same food on the road. And even if it's just a day trip, throw in there some beef jerky or something that's a protein or a fat that'll last longer, or even just a high quality carbohydrate, so you don't have to stop at McDonald's or Taco Bell. And so planning is key in health. It just is.
I had a friend of mine who just moved from Washington to Michigan and was making a several-day across-country trip. And he came by here hours before he got on the highway and left. And he was showing me this box of stuff he had on the front seat, doing exactly what you just described. I mean, he's a very health-conscious, health-minded individual. He had kind of an interesting journey. He lost 100 and some pounds here about 3 years ago, and has been paying a big attention to nutrition now for the last 2-3 years of his life. But that's exactly what he did. He just went, I have all these places that are going to have bad food along the way, and I'm going to end up eating that because I'm going to be hungry unless I'm prepared. And so he took off being prepared, and he was telling me, he's just getting ready to go. He goes, the one thing I forgot to stop for was a nice big jug of apple cider vinegar so I could mix it into my water and stuff, when it's getting along the way. And I'm going, well, my wife happens to have like 5 of them in the cupboard, so you can just take one of ours.
I love it.
yeah. So, but it was very cool to see somebody doing exactly what you just mentioned and preserving his health for the 3 days he's driving across country. Kyle, what do you got?
Well, I see our other guests are here.
Gotcha.
Well, I also have a question. What do you think about MTC oils?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. So the MTC, I think they're fabulous. They help maintain the steady blood sugar, and they're, if you get the right kinds with the and have them in the right way. And again, we can maybe have that for another topic. Different times of the day, I love them. I use them all the time.
Ask about the oils. So
okay. Well, great stuff today, Jody. Thanks for joining us. As always, we have a guest, Representative Jim Walsh, who has joined us. So we're going to let you go for now. But thanks for all the great information again about good quality carbs today. And we look forward to talking to you again down the road. And let's talk about the difference between good quality and poor quality proteins next time.
I'll put that on my list. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Jody. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone, we have Representative Jim Walsh, who has joined us in studio. And Jim, if you would, just come around the back here and get yourself comfortable in the chair there.
All right. How you guys doing?
Oh, just
Good.
grand.
Are we safe in assuming we have a Mr. Wilcox here too?
You are.
Just an assumption. All right. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us, popping in on SGM.
Yeah, well, it's always fun to stop by. Try to more and more. Lot going on.
So tell us what's going on.
Well, a lot of the nonsense that's going on up in Seattle is starting to have effect all around the place.
Chris, he said there's nonsense going on in Seattle. There can't be nonsense from Seattle, can there?
I'm telling you.
Well, they might.
Right.
This might be. I think that the latest news out of there, which focuses around this so-called head tax, which would basically a very high additional tax on employers. So basically, it's kind of like a payroll tax, but it's huge. It's a big chunk, and it's targeted at the largest employers in the city of Seattle. And I know you guys have been talking about this and posting about it, but it's worth attention because I think it's the straw that is breaking the camel's back. I think it's the thing, an economist would call it an inflection point, or you might hear it a tipping point. I think people have finally had enough, and they're starting to say that this stuff, this crazy anti-business, anti-commerce attitude has just gone too far, and we're going to see now. The city council up there is debating this head tax, and if they do pass it, and the sort of hardcore wacko lefties on their city council there are for this, they're supporting this idea.
Wait, we can call them wackies? I was told that we couldn't, but okay.
Is that
You can call them
triggering?
wackos.
Is that triggering? All
Nope,
right.
not at all.
If they do put it through, that city is going to see an exodus of business. They're just going to. And I think there's enough, people have had enough that they're really going to move if they add this piece to the equation up there. And so I and a couple of others, and Chris has talked about this on social media some, I have actually started contacting the 100 large employers in the city of Seattle who most of them signed this letter basically in opposition to the head tax. I've started reaching out to the executives there and representatives of those firms, offering them to come down here and just relocate.
Right.
And
At least come down and take a tour.
at least have a look. Exactly. And we're getting some good response. Now, this could all be just jockeying for position while this tax gets debated up there. But I think sometimes you just got to strike while the iron's hot, and I think the iron's hot, and this is the time to do it. And maybe we get the likes of an Amazon to look at coming down here, or maybe we get somebody else, maybe a smaller player who really can't afford the additional cost will come down and have a look. So we're starting those contacts, those conversations, and I'm serious about this. This is not a joke. We're going to try to find some of these guys to come down.
Two things. When you speak to these folks, will you have them send thank you letters to all the small business owners that testified to go ahead and let them, dig deeper into their pockets? Because I was reading some stuff last night where there were several small business owners that went in and said, yeah, taxes. And of course, they weren't subject to the tax. So,
right, because they're waived out of it. It really was fake. It was... I saw at least one of those too. A person who ran some trendy boutique operation and was carved out of the deal anyway. So.
In Seattle, there is somebody always hungrier than you for business. We are one of those people, so we'll take them if they
absolutely
we want to get them down here and bring them.
So we're going to use it. I mean, like I say, even if they wise up and don't pass the head tax up there, which for my purposes, I don't care what they do, but if I were living in Seattle, I would hope they would say no to this deal. Whatever they do, it doesn't matter what they do. We're going to use this opportunity to try to get some people look at coming down here. And, we've got space all over the place. We got space right along the 5 freeway. We got space closer out on the coast. We got a lot of space. And we have the infrastructure here. Now, some of it needs some upgrading and some modernization, but the fact is we've got the rail lines. We've got the port access. We've got the warehouse space. We've got the ability to do more business here.
Absolutely.
And as you know, Kevin, I mean, this is what I've been running on the whole time I've been in politics, is we got to do more business here. We got to bring more business to this area. So let's use the latest goofiness up in Seattle as a fulcrum that we can maybe pry off some of that commercial activity. I'm
wondering if you've ever had a chance to meet or run into the queen of the lunacy in Seattle, this Sawant.
Kashama Sawant is her name. She's a city council member up in Seattle. I have never had a substantive conversation with the councilwoman, but I have been in the same room with her at a couple of events. She and I don't really, our wavelengths aren't the same, let's say. So I don't know what that the conversation would be very meaningful. But
if your wavelengths were the same, we might have to rethink our vote for this fall.
To adjust my transceiver, right?
Yeah, we might have to make some changes.
So I've seen her operate, and I understand that she is kind of charismatic. I mean, in her world, she kind of rallies her base and appeals to a certain slice of the population. But I think what we're starting to see, at least I hope, is while that's effective in a small world, that slice of the population that Ms. Sawant appeals to doesn't represent most people in Washington. It's a small group. It's a vocal group. And as you know, in politics, there's always what they call the asymmetric quality to politics, where a few loud activists can shape a discussion, shape an issue much greater than their actual population presence is. And I think that the likes of Sawant has worked that kind of lever for a long time, and successfully. I mean, she's pushed her agenda on the city of Seattle for quite a while now. But I think it's coming to the end of that cycle. I think the pendulum is starting to swing back, and people are really starting to say, look, this is just, it's too much, it's too angry, it's too goofy, it's too bad economics. I mean, you don't have to be like a Chicago school economist to see if you keep running up the costs endlessly, you're going to eventually chase people off. And I think people are starting to, who were maybe on the fence before, are starting to see that that's really happening. And I am optimistic. I mean, I think it's going to be good for us in our area, and I think it's going to be good for the whole state, that people are starting to get wise to this stuff.
One of the conversations that I saw recently here on social media had to do with Sawant and talking about the economics in Seattle. They mentioned that surprisingly, this lady has a PhD in economics. And I said, well, you know what? I've actually had several courses in economics in my educational background, and I can tell you there were plenty of people in the classes who didn't really get it. And I think of ventriloquist Jeff Dunham and his little character Peanut, and the little expression he does where he goes, wow. And so I think about like basic economics and what actually does make sense there. And I'm going, the PhD doesn't mean that somebody actually really gets.
Well, the great George Orwell, who wrote 1984 and Animal Farm and some great books, he wrote those famous novels, but he was also a journalist in his time. And he had a great line in one of his essays that there are some ideas that are so stupid only an academic can appreciate them. And I think Orwell is right. He was years ago, of course, but I think he anticipated the likes of Kashama Sawant with that comment. These things go in cycles, and that cycle, her cycle, the radical left cycle, it's come to an end. And I think you're going to see, we've seen their greatest influence, and I think now common sense is going to regain some traction, and the pendulum is going to swing back into a more sensible direction. At least I hope it is, and I really believe it. I mean, I've been contacted by a lot of people about this, and I've been staking out in Olympia some space as the kind of pro-business alternative to some of these ideas, and it's been lonely at times, but more people are contacting me now and saying, yeah, Jim, you were right. This is just too much, and what can we do to kind of make this a little more sensible? And so, like I say, I'm encouraged by this. I'm optimistic. I think we're gonna have a good year, or a couple of years here, where both in Seattle and in our area of Washington, we bring it back. We bring the frame back. We we get a little better about encouraging business. And you know what it is. I mean, we got to grow the pie. We have the ability, the infrastructure, we have the people, we have the elements we need to have an economic recovery here. We just have to do it. We just have to commit to doing it. And people like Kashama Sawant, and she's not the only one, you know. The governor, Jay Inslee, has been kind of riding in her wake. You know, he lets her be the lightning rod, but a lot of his policies are pretty close to some of the stuff she's been saying. So he lets her kind of walk the point, and then he follows along behind there. So, you know, the governor doesn't have clean hands here either. He's pushed some pretty wacky stuff. So, you know, maybe we can rein the governor in. We can bring him a little more to the middle and not be quite so ridiculous.
Maybe this is a really bad analogy, but wasn't it Osama bin Laden who had people walking the point looking for the landmines before he got there? It's a common strategy here.
Yeah, that guy's out of control.
Well, you know, I mean, but it's people like Sawant, it's the radicals who allow someone like Inslee to be as bad for business as he is. You know, if they weren't there pushing the line way far out, you know, he couldn't drift so far that direction. So if we can bring it all back in a little more to the middle, I'm not talking about, you know, turning this place, you know, hard right or anything. I'm just saying bring it to the middle. Bring it to the middle of the spectrum. You know, take it easy on all these goofy tax bills that they just come up with, and they won't let go. They keep bringing them up, and we vote them down, and they bring them up, and then we vote them down, and they find some other way to go around it and bring it up, and we vote them down. And whether it's we in the legislature say no, or you guys out there, when you get an initiative, you say no. I mean, we've said no to this carbon tax so many times, and they keep bringing it back. And we say no to the gas taxes, and they bring it back. We say no to the state income tax, and they keep bringing it back. Maybe they'll get smart and figure out that there's got to be another way to do it. And the other way to do it is the old-fashioned way. Bring commerce into your area, grow the property tax base that way, and fill the coffers. If you want to run a lot of government programs, fill the coffers the right way with more commerce, with rising property values that increase the tax receipts that you get. And then you can build more roads, you can dredge out your marinas more often, you can do more to help the homeless. Whatever your agenda is, if you fund it right, there are more resources to do it. And this idea that Sawant and Inslee and I would even say the Speaker of the House up in Olympia, Frank Chop, they're all in this together. Their idea is kind of, you know, well, we can't grow the pie, so let's just renegotiate how we slice the pie up. And that's, you know, that's not the way to do it. That's certainly not why I'm involved. I'm for growing the pie. And that way there's more for everybody. There's more to do. And there's more for people at home. I mean, you know, a growing economy gives you a higher income, gives you a higher property value on a house you have. It makes your life better. And in the process, we make everybody's life better.
What you said about bringing more jobs, that makes way more sense to help the homeless, because I kept hearing the union workers testifying the other day. We want to take these homeless and we want to bring them into the union. We want to make them brothers. We want to give them jobs.
Sure.
So taxing people is not the way to make that money. Bringing more jobs is. You've got a very good point there.
Yeah, and we, you know, they call it the homeless industrial complex. There's this growing kind of web of entities, nonprofits. Some are government, some are not government, but they're NGOs, non-government organizations. It's a combination of different entities, but they're all together, and they want that money. They want taxes because they want to run these programs to help the homeless. But they have a large bureaucratic overhead. And, you know, a lot of people wearing, you know, black turtleneck shirts and driving BMWs. And they got, you know, that has to be fed. And I don't like that. I think the better way to go is what Chris was saying, is help people up, get them kind of the captains of their own destiny, charge of their own lives, and I think they'll, by and large, fend for themselves. You know, they'll feel more you know, I mean, you have a good job, you feel self-confidence, you feel self-esteem. You know, I'm doing something, I'm contributing, I'm helping build something, I'm helping deliver something, whatever my job is. I feel good about myself. You know, I can live a better life. I start out with a rental apartment, I move on to a rental house, I buy a small place, I'm on a good track. And that's what we need to give people. People talk a lot about hope. That's the hope we have to give people. And I'm with the union guys you're talking about there.
Yeah,
Let's get these people working.
Yeah, that's something that several of the union guys said repeatedly was let's get these guys employed. Let's get them to be union.
You know what's interesting on the homeless issue when you say that for the most part they'll fend for themselves. This past Christmas, there was myself and a couple other friends. We spent a good chunk of Christmas Eve. Then of course we came home and had some family time, and then Christmas Day we spent in a van that we had put together 45, somewhere in that neighborhood, survival kits, and they were basically made up of all these necessities if you're going to be outside camping. And anyhow, we were going around, and part of what we were doing is looking for people, visiting with them. So we were finding homeless people, and what's kind of your story, and where are you going, and what are you doing? And we were kind of looking for a little bit of this message of, here's how I'm bettering myself. Here's how I'm changing my current circumstance. And out of that conversation, they go, well, hey, here's a survival kit to help you with it. And it's got this in it, that in it, whatever. But that's what we were looking for. And in the combination of the time we spent out on Christmas Eve and the time we spent out on Christmas Day, we gave away roughly 36, 37 of those, and then brought the balance of them over to the warming shelter here in town. But anyway, we successfully found that many different people who actually had a kind of an inspiring message to share as to where they were going. It wasn't like they felt like, you know, the world's ended, I don't have any other options, or I'm not doing anything else. We heard some really interesting stories on how they were solving their own problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've all had low points in our lives. We've all made mistakes. I mean, we've all been in places where it's not where I want to be. And we all have our stories. The details are different, but everyone's experienced that in one way or another. And what happens when you're at that low point? What happens when you make that mistake? Do you get locked in to a permanent life of making mistakes and being low? Or do you do what you say? Do you say, okay, look, this is not where I want to be. I want to be somewhere else. I want to be in better shape. I want to do whatever I want to do. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to move on I'm going to get better. I'm going to get whole. I'm going to get back to where I want to be. Those are the people we want to help, just like you were doing with those kids on Christmas. And what a great thing. That was great for your kids to do, too, to see that. We want to help those people get back on the right track. And whatever that track is, we're not going to tell them what their life should be, but get in a good direction, get moving. We want to do that. We don't want to lock them into a life of bad choices. And so much of that homeless industrial complex we talk about is vested in locking people in to where they are. Well, you know, you're a vagrant. You have no income. You have no home. You know, that's what you are. And here we've got a plan where we're going to find you a place. But, you know, you're homeless. That's what you are. You are one of the homeless.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody who's homeless thinks I'm the homeless. Yeah. They think, okay, I screwed up. I had some bad stuff happen. I'm in a place for a moment, but I'm gonna go somewhere. I'm gonna turn this around.
It's not a destination. It's a stepping stone, unfortunately, for some people to where they want to go.
Right. We hope so. A transition. Yeah. They talk about transitional housing a lot. I'm for those kinds of programs. Transitional housing. Get you off the street, get you moving in a better direction, but not a permanent life. Like, this is what you are, this is where you stand, this is how it's going to be. Let's get people moving. Let's get people up and out. And let's help those organizations that do that. Let's be wary of the organizations that are full of the consultants and the planning and the overhead, because a lot of the resources that we collectively gather through our taxes and distribute to these activities, I'm concerned they get sucked up into a lot of overhead, a lot of fancy cars, a lot of fancy clothes, And I'm not talking about the people who need the clothes. I'm talking about the people who put together the programs. And you know, I'd like to see more of the fancy clothes and cars go into the people who are down and out and need the help. And I was talking with Frank Morrison at Community House recently, and he was talking about one of the people who had been there, a young gal, and she had a kid and was in a bad place. And they got her off the street, and they got her kind of with a job and going the right way. And he said that eventually they get, at Community House, they get cars. I mean, people will donate cars to them, and they'll refurbish the car and give them or sell them for a good price to people who've been in the community house and they need help. And Frank was telling me about how this gal, she got this car and she just started crying because she was so happy to have a means of transport. And the difference that kind of thing can make in that woman's life, to have a car so she can get to a job, maybe 2 jobs. Much easier to do if you got a car and you don't have to wait on a bus or something. And she can use that asset to add value, to make her life better, take care of her kid, take care of herself. That's what we want to do. We want to get those kinds of assets in people's hands so that they can build on them. They can take that asset and not just consume it and come back for more, but use that asset to create more income for themselves, to create more benefit for themselves. It gets back to the old hand a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. I mean, let's teach that young woman to fish. Exactly. That way we don't have to give her a fish. She can get her own fish.
That's exactly right.
Open up a fish stand and sell some fish and get a boat and go out and fish more. I mean, we want to add that value. Yeah,
exactly. Well, talking about needing to do things and having all this, heat on these various issues, we're headed into a nice presumably toasty warm summer. You got a busy summer ahead of you.
That's
what's next on your horizon?
Oh, well, on the political front, next week is the filing week. And so and anybody who's interested at politics on any level, next week is your chance. It's when everybody files in this state for elective office, leading to the elections this November.
So are you encouraging a lot of competitors for your state?
Hey, it's a market response.
Yeah.
I'm encouraging anybody who's sitting on the fence that to throw their hat in the ring for whatever the job is. I mean, as we've talked before on the show, there are lots of elective jobs that are very local. A lot of the classic story is there are cemetery districts, there are diking districts, there are very local elected offices that don't require a great amount of money or time, but are ways you can get involved, and basically they're part-time gigs, and running for them doesn't cost a great deal of money, and you can kind of test it out. You can see if you like the process, if if you enjoy it once you get in there. So there are lots of elective positions you can look at. Whatever your political orientation is, there's, in our state we call them PCOs, precinct committee officers. Different states call them different things. But in our state, PCOs are often the kind of entry point for people into the political process. And you can run for any party, PCO. Most people run for either Republican or Democrat. And if you get elected PCO, that's only in your precinct, so it's a very local election. And usually these elections are decided by a couple hundred votes, sometimes even less. It gets you in the process. Then you are a local elected official into that party, one or the other. And you go to the monthly meetings, and you are the body of the political party.
Right.
And I encourage people to look at that. If they're on the fence and they're thinking, I'd like to get into politics, but I don't know if I like it, don't know if I trust it. The PCO is a good way to do it, because you get to look at the structure of politics, and you get a good understanding of how that works, and that way you can decide whether you want more or whether you've had enough just doing that. So you can file for PCO in your precinct where you live next week too, and that one there's no fee in our state. There's no cost to file to be a PCO.
So for somebody who maybe doesn't like the process or whatever, get involved and change it.
This is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
You can really get a voice there, and even if all you do is get up once a month at the meeting and tell them all you think they're making mistakes and they're terrible and they're going the wrong way, you've got a platform to do that if you're a PCO. And we need all kinds of voices. We need the ones saying we're making mistakes, as well as the ones who say we're doing the right things. So if you're thinking about it at all, next week is your chance. The filing week is all week next week. It ends on Friday, next Friday, the 18th. But if you're considering it, look at PCO.
So, not to get off on a different subject, but Friday is the 18th. Do you know what historical significance it has here locally?
Really?
May 18th, 1980, 8:32 in the morning.
I remember.
Mount St. Helens erupted.
That's right. It was May.
Yeah, there we go. I was a young kid in this area at the time, but I was listening to the radio, and I remember very vividly hearing David Johnson's voice saying, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," and radio going dead. That was freaky eerie.
That's right. It was in the morning. Right.
Yeah, so that anniversary is coming up. So
well, let's hope that this May 18th
that
is not as disastrous as that May 18th was.
That is correct. So where's your next stop? You're in Longview today. Where are you headed? I mean, you don't have an obligation to be in your office in Olympia at this moment. So
no, not at this moment. I mean, it's been pretty busy in Olympia. Some of this stuff about trying to talk to some of these Seattle companies about moving down has taken some time. We're doing that out of the office there. Those conversations. There's on the north end of my district, of our legislative district in Aberdeen. They've got a situation going on with a homeless camp there that has kind of some of the earmarks of the Love Overwhelming issue, the shelter that was here.
Is this the one that was visible off the river?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not exactly the same as what we saw down here, but some of the elements are similar.
Is this the guy that wants the people off his property?
It's private property.
Yeah,
the owner's trying to evict the squatters, and he's being given a real legal runaround about how to legally get the people
all
off
they
his
have
property.
to do is come up here to Kelso and look at the police records, do police reports, and talk to the citizens in Kelso. And they'll get all the answers they need.
Well, I've encouraged them to do that. We'll work on that. We'll work on that more. But I'm trying to help those guys. Yeah. They need to get some help there, and we want to try to. I don't think it's going to get terribly dangerous or anything, but it's tense, and we need to get a good resolution there. So I've been working on that. But no, I'm in district a lot. I'm meeting people here today, constituents, people who've got issues they want to talk about. You might see me out and around. I'm putting some signs up. My campaign manager, Jimmy Wilcox, and I are going to be out putting up some signs and doing a little knocking and shaking hands and talking to people. So there's always time, always doing retail politics, always talking to people.
Wilcox. Ice cubes?
All right. So the campaigns ahead, any particular issues that you think are really significant that people should be paying attention to? And before you answer that question, I want to mention something, Jim. I've been around the business of media a long time. I've interviewed a lot of representatives from every different walk of life, visited with a lot of different politicians. I can tell you, not just here in Washington, but anywhere else that I've been around the country, you've been the most accessible, easy to get a hold of person I have ever known to be in elected office.
Well, thanks, Kevin. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely have been.
Well, I mean, people often get behind the walls because they're afraid of people who don't agree with them. They're afraid of getting confronted about things. And one of the things I thought when I first started this was I just wasn't going to shy away from that. If people want to give me heck because they don't like something I'm doing,
have the conversation.
I'll just have the conversation. I'll listen to it. I mean, I can't always address everything they're concerned about, but I'll try. And you know, it's a process, but I think you've got to listen to people who don't agree with you. And you know, as on social media, I let people vent if they want to vent. I mean, my only rules are you can't use obscenity on my social media pages, and you can't actually threaten. I've had a few people get on there and threaten to hurt somebody, and you can't do that. You can't use obscenity, and people generally respect that. I mean, you get a few people get on there and drop a bunch of F-bombs or something, but for the most part,
I believe a candidate for sheriff's office here in Calais County did that on your page.
Yes. So you know, people are generally okay. So, but thanks for saying that. And you know, you kind of have to check your ego at the door a little bit when you do this, I think. And Lord knows, I mean, last cycle I got hit with some really nasty negative mail pieces. And
we remember those.
You just have to kind of check your ego and say, look, that's part of the game. It's part of the process. You can't let it upset you that much. And so I try to keep that attitude. So thanks. I mean, as for issues to look out for, well, there are going to be a bunch of initiatives in November. Very likely the latest go round of the carbon tax. They're calling it a pollution fee, but it's a carbon tax. And as your viewers well know, it translates mostly into a higher gas tax. So it ends up it affects things in a couple of ways, but the main way you'll see it is even higher gas prices. So I encourage people to vote no on that one. You're going to see this I-940, which is the law enforcement one, and that's cooking up to maybe be even more controversial. That's I consider it a very anti-cop reform initiative, which requires law enforcement officers to follow a very complicated and, in my opinion, non-productive protocol if there's any kind of violence, if there's a shooting or other. Now, we want to avoid bad shoots with law enforcement,
of course, but
I don't think this goes about it in a good way. So so you're going to see that I-940. I would also be a no on that one. You're probably going to see I-1600, which is the free healthcare initiative. Buried in that one is a state income tax. So, you know, they're very tricky. I mean, some of these people, the Seattle types we're talking about, Swamp and the others, they almost have like a religious fervor about needing a state income tax in Washington. And they'll go about it any old way they can think of to try to get that state income tax. And I'm a strong no to those schemes too. So we can talk about those more as we go along, but I think those are going to be at least three of the issues that we're going to be talking about through the summer and the fall in this election cycle. And you know, it's simple stuff, but we got to keep the pressure on, push back against some of these bad policies.
Kyle, you wanted to mention about Frankenstein.
Absolutely. So tonight at 7 p.m. you can catch a really cool show, Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein, not Young Frankenstein, but Frankenstein, at Kelso High School at 7 p.m. It's $5 for thespians, $7 for students, $7 for senior citizens, $10 for adults, or $13 for VIP. I believe that includes snacks. So
it does. I saw that in the
snacks are pretty cool.
And special seating, of course.
Special seating as well.
I think that's a great idea too. It's a great premise for a play. I saw the ad for it too.
And tomorrow is also closing night, so not only are they going to have a show at 2 p.m. tomorrow, they're also going to have a show at, again, 7 p.m. tomorrow, and they're going to put another twist upon their twist. See, it's not just regular Frankenstein. They got something special on it, and it's actually really cool, and I really love their take on it. I won't tell you, though, because you have to go see it. But
the best shows are always at the end of run.
Absolutely. So check it out tomorrow, closing night. It's a blast.
All right, sounds good. Well, we got to leave it there. We're out of time for today, but thanks as always, Jim, for showing up here and contributing to the broadcast. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here on NorthWest Digital News. I'm Kevin Hunter, Chris Bornstead, Kyle Torgerson, and again, thanks to Jim Walsh for joining us here on NorthWest Digital News. Till next time, take care.